Before the sea parted and the people were freed from slavery, imagine an Egypt devastated by plagues, starting with the waters of the Nile turning into blood, and ending with the death of every firstborn, from Pharaoh's own son to the livestock of the land. A people suffering under the weight of oppression, enslaved, while death hovered over the land. But in the heart of this chaos, something extraordinary was about to unfold. Israel, the chosen people, was on the brink of freedom after centuries of bondage. And the parting of the Red Sea would become the miracle that would forever mark the course of human history. In the midst of roaring winds, the sea split apart, opening a path of deliverance for a people fighting to survive. But this is not just an ancient tale. It's a story of faith, courage, and redemption, where one man, Moses, stood up against the most powerful empire on earth and led his people toward a new beginning. But what happens when doubt and rebellion threaten to destroy everything that was gained? What happens when, even in the face of miracles and promises, faith begins to falter? In this video, we'll take you deep into this epic journey, a journey where we'll see how God delivered his people from the hands of Pharaoh through the 10 plagues of Egypt. Join us in this unforgettable story of redemption, where every step taken by Moses and the people of Israel was guided by the hand of God. Don't miss it. Let's relive together the moments that gave birth to a nation and a faith that still echoes to this day. Over the years, the people of Israel prospered and multiplied in Egypt. What had once been a place of refuge, saved from the famine that struck the land during the days of Joseph, son of Jacob, also called Israel, had now turned into a prison of oppression and hatred toward God's people. A new Pharaoh rose to power, one who knew nothing about Joseph and viewed the Hebrews with suspicion. He declared, "They are too many, they are strong. If war breaks out, they might side with our enemies and escape our control." Fearing the strength of Israel, Egypt decreed their enslavement. The sons of Jacob, descendants of Abraham, the people of the promise, were now prisoners in Egypt. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied. Pharaoh's fear grew deeper, and he resolved to crush the people of God. A new decree was announced, one that filled every Hebrew home with horror. Every newborn Hebrew boy was to be thrown into the Nile. Only the girls would be spared. But amidst sorrow and suffering, in a humble home of the tribe of Levi, a child was born, a child destined to change the course of history. This child would later be known as Moses. A mother who disobeyed the king. With a heavy heart and trembling hands, she hid her son for 3 months. When she could no longer keep him hidden, she prepared a basket of reeds, sealed it with tar and pitch, and placed it among the reeds of the river. She entrusted her child to God's care. And there in the waters of the Nile, Pharaoh's daughter found him. Moved by compassion, she took him into her arms. She named him Moses, because I drew him out of the water. He grew up in the halls of the palace, raised as a prince of Egypt, educated in language, science, strategy, and war. But deep down, He knew he was not Egyptian. One day, now a grown man, Moses walked through the imperial construction sites, and he saw with his own eyes what he had only heard in whispers before: the suffering of his people, crushing burdens, whips cracking, blood in the sand. Then he saw it, an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave mercilessly. Something awakened in Moses, a fire, a drive. He struck the attacker and killed him. But the secret spread. Pharaoh found out, and Moses fled to the desert. In the desert of Midian, he was received by a priest. There he met Zipporah, whom he married, and for years he traded the scepter for a shepherd's staff, from prince to shepherd. For 40 years he lived as a shepherd. Egypt became a distant memory, the mission of his youth swept away by the desert winds. But God had not forgotten Moses. One day on God's mountain, fire called to him, a burning bush that was not consumed. As he drew near, he heard a voice. "Moses, Moses," he answered. "Here I am." "Remove your sandals, for the place where you stand is holy ground. I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I have seen the suffering of my people in Egypt, and I have come down to deliver them. Go now, I will send you to Pharaoh." Moses hesitated. He protested. He said he wasn't eloquent or worthy, but God gave him signs and a promise: "I will be with you." And so Moses left the wilderness and returned to Egypt. The man who fled as an exile now returned as a messenger of God. With Aaron at his side, he stood before the elders of Israel and shared everything God had told him. The elders believed. They bowed and worshiped because they knew God had not forgotten them. Moses and Aaron then entered Pharaoh's palace. The king's eyes gleamed with arrogance. Pharaoh smiled at the sight of them. Those two men meant nothing to him. Still, Moses raised his staff and spoke with authority. "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says: Let my people go, so they may worship me in the wilderness." The room fell silent. Then Pharaoh laughed, full of scorn. "Who is this Lord that I should obey his voice? I do not know your God, and I will not let Israel go." Pharaoh turned to his overseers. "If they have time to speak of freedom, they're not working hard enough. From now on, no more straw will be provided for their bricks. Let them gather it themselves. But the quota stays the same. Fail, and they will be punished." And so, the burden on Israel grew heavier. The Hebrew overseers were brutally beaten, and the people screamed in despair. The people in despair turned to Moses. "You promised us freedom, but now our suffering has only increased." Moses turned to God. "Lord, why have you allowed this? Since we spoke to Pharaoh, he's become even more cruel. Your promise feels further away than ever." God replied to Moses, "Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. With a mighty hand I will compel Egypt to release my people. I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. With my outstretched arm I will bring them out, and Egypt will know that I am the Lord. They will be my people, and I will be their God. I am the Lord." God gave Moses signs and wonders, and Moses returned to Pharaoh's palace. But this time he wasn't alone. Empowered by God, Moses and Aaron stood before Pharaoh once again. With boldness, Aaron declared, "This is the command of the Lord. Let my people go." Pharaoh remained unmoved, arms crossed. "Aaron, throw down your staff," Moses ordered. Aaron cast it to the ground, and it instantly became a serpent. Pharaoh's advisors backed down, but Pharaoh was not convinced. He waved to his magicians. "Is that all your God can do?" The Egyptian sorcerers threw down their staffs, and they too turned into serpents. But Aaron's serpent swallowed them all. The priests were shaken, but Pharaoh hardened his heart. "This is nothing but cheap magic," he said. "My answer remains the same. Israel will not go." And so the judgment of God fell upon Egypt. Egypt defied the Almighty. Pharaoh hardened his heart and refused to listen or bow. Now God would speak not with words, but with signs. Signs Egypt would never forget. Moses and Aaron stood by the Nile, the river that symbolized life and pride for Egypt. But now the Nile would become the empire's downfall. Moses declared, "This is the decree of the Lord. Let my people go, or the waters of the Nile will turn to blood." Aaron raised his staff, touched the water, and the river turned to blood. Fish died and floated lifeless, and the stench became unbearable. The Egyptians desperately searched for water, but every spring, well, and stream had turned to blood. "That doesn't impress me," Pharaoh scoffed. "My magicians can do the same." Pharaoh hardened his heart and refused to let Israel go. 7 days passed. The Lord spoke to Moses in a firm, unwavering voice. He told him to go to Pharaoh and say, "Thus says the Lord, let my people go so they may worship me. If you refuse, I will send a plague of frogs upon your land." Moses entered the palace and stood before Pharaoh's throne. His gaze was steady and his voice full of authority. "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands, let my people go. If you do not obey, Egypt will be overrun with frogs. They will come from the river and invade your home, your bedroom, your bed, the houses of your officials and people. They will infest ovens and kneading bowls. Nothing will escape." Then Moses turned to Aaron and said, "Raise your staff over the rivers, canals, and ponds. Bring forth the frogs over the entire land of Egypt." Without hesitation, Aaron obeyed. He stretched out his staff and touched the waters, and then it began. From the depths of the Nile, frogs began to rise by the thousands. They spread like a living plague, leaping through streets, homes, markets, and palaces. They covered floors, filled beds, jumped on sleeping faces. All of Egypt pulsed beneath the cold, damp feet of these creatures. Pharaoh's magicians also summoned frogs with their spells and tricks. But they couldn't stop the plague. They only made it worse. Desperate, Pharaoh summoned Moses. He pleaded, "Ask the Lord to remove these frogs. If you do, I will let your people go to offer sacrifices." Moses replied, "Tell me when you want it done." "Tomorrow," Pharaoh said. "It will be as you say, so that you may know there is no one like the Lord," Moses answered. Then he left the palace, knelt down, and prayed fervently. The Lord heard his voice, and the frogs died in homes, courtyards, and fields. The Egyptians gathered them in massive heaps, and the stench was unbearable. The land reeked of rot. But when relief came, Pharaoh changed his mind. His heart hardened once more, and he refused to let God's people go. The Lord spoke to Moses once more. His command was clear. Tell Aaron to stretch out his staff and strike the dust of the earth. It will become lice throughout the land of Egypt. Without hesitation, Moses relayed the instruction. Aaron struck the ground with his staff. As the dust rose, it turned into swarms of lice. Tiny, invisible at first, but soon they were everywhere. What had once been dry earth became a living plague. The lice clung to the skin of men and animals. All of Egypt scratched, groaned, and writhed. Not even the cattle were spared. Breathing became unbearable under the irritation, the torment, the infestation. The magicians tried. With their secret arts, they repeated their spells, but this time they failed. The lice were beyond them. Nothing worked. One of them approached Pharaoh, his face pale and his hands still scratching. This is the finger of God. But even as his own sorcerers admitted defeat, Pharaoh would not yield. His heart, harder than desert stone, remained shut. As the Lord had said, he would not listen. The Lord spoke to Moses before sunrise. Rise early and go to meet Pharaoh as he goes to the river. Say to him, this is what the Lord says. Let my people go so they may worship me. If you refuse, I will send swarms of flies upon you, your officials, your people, and your houses. The land of Egypt will be invaded. Moses went to the banks of the Nile and confronted Pharaoh. He looked the king in the eyes and declared, if you refuse to let the people go, the Lord will send swarms of flies. They will fill your palace, your officials' homes, every street and dwelling. But in Goshen, where God's people live, not a single fly will appear. The Lord will make a distinction between your people and ours, and this will happen tomorrow. The next day, just as the Lord had said, the plague struck. Black swarms of flies descended on Egypt. They covered the walls, swarmed across the ground, and buzzed constantly in every ear. Pharaoh's palace, the temples, the markets, the roads, nothing escaped. The land was ruined. The air was unbreathable. Gasping, surrounded by chaos, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron. Go, he said, offer sacrifices to your God, but stay in the land. Moses shook his head. We cannot. The sacrifices we offer to the Lord are detestable to your people. If we do this here, they will stone us. We must go 3 days into the desert, as the Lord commanded. Pharaoh relented slightly. Fine, go, but don't go far, and pray for me. Moses replied, I will leave now and pray to the Lord. Tomorrow the flies will be gone, but do not deceive us again. Let the people go. Moses left the palace and cried out to the Lord, and the Lord listened. The next day every fly vanished, not one remained. Egypt breathed in relief. But like before, Pharaoh hardened his heart. He turned his back on his promise, and once again, he refused to let the people go. The Lord spoke to Moses once more. Go to Pharaoh and say, this is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says. Let my people go, so they may worship me. But if you continue to refuse and insist on keeping them captive, My hand will strike your livestock with a deadly plague. Moses met Pharaoh on a street in the city. Pharaoh rode in his royal chariot. Moses announced, "If you continue to enslave the Lord's people, a plague will strike your horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, and sheep. But Israel's livestock will be spared. Not a single animal will die among them. Tomorrow this word will come true." At dawn the next day, Egypt's silence was broken by the first cries. The plague had begun. Egypt's fields became graveyards. Horses collapsed one by one. Donkeys lost their strength. Camels fell sideways. Oxen and sheep lay still, scorched under the sun. The plague did not fail. Rural Egypt was in ruins. But in Goshen, where the Israelites lived, not a single animal died. The contrast was undeniable, and Pharaoh knew it. Yet Pharaoh's heart closed once again. He refused to let the people go. The Lord gave Moses and Aaron a new instruction. Take handfuls of soot from a furnace. Moses, throw it into the air before Pharaoh. It will spread across all of Egypt and become boils, open sores on people and animals. Moses appeared before Pharaoh and in front of his eyes lifted his hands holding the ashes. With a firm gesture, he cast the powder into the air. The dark dust scattered, carried by the wind, covering all the land. And then it began. Egyptian skin started to burn, swell, and rupture. Tumors opened into festering wounds. The boils spread out of control, from nobles to slaves, soldiers to priests. Even the animals were not spared. Egypt's magicians tried to rise, but they couldn't even stand before Moses. They were covered in the same sores. They groaned in pain, powerless, humiliated. No spell, no magic, no science could stop it. And still, Pharaoh did not yield. The Lord hardened the king's heart, and he turned away. Once again, he refused to listen. Once again, God's people remained where they were. The Lord spoke to Moses at the break of day. The command was clear. Go to Pharaoh and say, "This is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says. Let my people go so they may worship me. This time I will send the full force of my plagues upon you, your officials, and your people, so you may know there is no one like me in all the earth. I could have destroyed you already, but I've kept you alive so that you might witness my power, and so my name will be proclaimed across the earth. Yet still you stand against my people?" Moses went to the palace and stood before the king. His voice was solemn, filled with gravity. "Tomorrow at this same time, the Lord will send a storm unlike any seen in Egypt. Hail mixed with fire, devastating. Bring in your livestock and servants from the fields, for any left exposed will die." Among Pharaoh's officials, some feared the Lord's word. They ran to shelter their animals and servants. But others mocked and left everything outside, as if nothing would happen. At the appointed time, the Lord said to Moses, "Raise your staff toward the sky." Moses lifted his staff. The sky darkened, thunder cracked, and Egypt trembled. Lightning split the clouds. Then the storm began. Hail poured from the heavens, accompanied by fire. The impact was brutal. Fist-sized stones crashed down, shattering trees, killing animals, destroying homes, taking lives. No previous plague had matched this. The countryside was in ruins. Every plant, every tree, every animal caught outside was gone. Flax and barley, already mature, were wiped out. Only wheat and spelt, still unbudded, survived. In Goshen, where the Israelites lived, the sky was calm. Not a single stone fell. In panic, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron. Eyes lowered, he confessed, "This time I have sinned. The Lord is righteous. I and my people are wicked. Ask him to stop the thunder and hail. You may go. Just end this." Moses replied, "When I leave the city, I will lift my hands to the Lord. The storm will stop, and you will know this land belongs to him. But I know you and your officials still do not fear the Lord." Moses left the city, raised his hands to the sky, and instantly the thunder ceased, the hail stopped, and the sky cleared. But when Pharaoh saw that the storm had ended, he changed his mind. He sinned again. His heart and the hearts of his officials hardened once more. He refused to let the people go. The Lord spoke to Moses once more. "Go to Pharaoh. I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his officials to perform these signs among them. Then you will tell your children and grandchildren how I dealt with the Egyptians and what signs I performed, so that you may know I am the Lord." Moses and Aaron appeared before Pharaoh with a message that sounded like a sentence. "This is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says. How long will you refuse to humble yourself? Let my people go so they may worship me. If you do not, tomorrow I will bring a swarm of locusts over Egypt. They will cover the ground until it cannot be seen. They will eat what was left after the hail. They will fill your houses, the homes of your officials, and all of Egypt. No one has seen anything like it, not your ancestors nor their ancestors before them." Moses left the palace in silence. Tension dropped like a weight in Pharaoh's halls. His officials rebelled. "How long will this man be a threat? Let them go. Egypt is already in ruins." As Moses and Aaron were leaving, Pharaoh had them brought back. "Worship the Lord more," he said, "but tell me, who will be going?" Moses replied without hesitation, "We will all go. Young and old, sons and daughters, flocks and herds. We will hold a festival to the Lord." Pharaoh's expression changed. Enraged, he shouted, "Never! Only the men may go. That's what you want, isn't it? Now leave." And they were driven out of the palace. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over Egypt, and the locusts will come to devour all that is left." Moses raised his staff. A strong east wind began to blow. Gentle at first, but relentless. It lasted all day and all night. By morning, the sky was dark. The locusts had arrived. They covered the land. There was no horizon, no color, only a sea of wings. They swarmed the fields, clung to the trees, devoured leaves, flowers, fruit. What the hail had not destroyed, the locusts consumed to the last bud. Nothing green remained in all of Egypt. The devastation was so swift and severe that Pharaoh, desperate, summoned Moses and Aaron. "I have sinned against the Lord and against you. Please forgive me one more time. Pray to the Lord to remove this deadly plague." Moses left and prayed to the Lord. And the Lord sent a powerful west wind. It swept the locusts away from Egypt, casting them into the Red Sea. Not one remained. But Pharaoh's heart remained hardened. Once again, he refused to let the people go. The Lord spoke to Moses with a command that chilled the soul. Stretch out your hand toward the sky, and darkness will fall over the land of Egypt. Darkness so thick it can be felt. Without hesitation, Moses raised his hand, and the sky went dark. A thick, suffocating darkness fell across Egypt. It wasn't just the absence of light. It felt as though life itself had vanished. For 3 days, no one saw another. The Egyptians were frozen, trapped inside their homes, sitting in silence, gripped by fear. No torches, no lamps, no sun. But in Goshen, where the children of Israel lived, there was light. In the midst of despair, Pharaoh summoned Moses. His voice was weary but defiant. Go, worship the Lord, take your children, but leave behind your flocks and herds. Moses stood firm. No, we must take our animals to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. Not a hoof will be left behind. We will only know what the Lord requires once we arrive. Pharaoh was furious. His eyes burned with rage as he shouted, Leave my presence! And be warned, if I see your face again, you will die. Moses turned calmly and replied before leaving, Very well, I will never see your face again. The final night arrived, and with it, death drew near. Egypt would weep that night. The nation was on its knees, devastated. The plagues had ravaged the land. Fields were scorched. Livestock was dead. The people were drowning in despair. But one final judgment remained. The darkest night was about to fall. God spoke to Moses, I will bring one last plague on Egypt. After this, Pharaoh will drive you out. At midnight I will pass through Egypt. Every firstborn shall die, from Pharaoh's heir to the slave's son. But among Israel I will make a distinction. The first Passover, God gave clear instructions to his people. That night would be the first Passover. Moses declared, each family must take a spotless lamb, sacrifice it, and mark their doorposts and lintels with its blood, for judgment is coming. But the blood will protect you. The Hebrews ate in haste, with sandals on their feet and staffs in hand, ready to leave, ready to answer the call to freedom. At midnight, while Egypt slept in darkness and silence, the Lord passed through the land. And then it happened. One by one, the firstborn fell. Pharaoh's own son, heir to the throne, died in his golden bed. The prisoner's child, forgotten in the dungeon, was not spared. Even the animals were struck down. Every Egyptian household, from palace to the poorest shack, suffered a loss. A wave of screams rose across the nation. It was the sound of anguish. No home was untouched by grief. No street was silent. All of Egypt mourned in the dead of night. And then it happened. One by one, the firstborn fell. Pharaoh's own son, heir to the throne, died in his golden bed. The prisoner's child, forgotten in the dungeon, was not spared. Even the animals were struck down. Every Egyptian household, from palace to the poorest shack, suffered a loss. A wave of screams rose across the nation. It was the sound of anguish. No home was untouched by grief. No street was silent. All of Egypt mourned in the dead of night. The Egyptians no longer resisted. They ran to the Israelites, urging them, Go! Leave us, before we all die! The Hebrew people, with no time to let the dough rise, took their unleavened bread, wrapped their kneading bowls in cloth, and carried them on their shoulders. Before departing, they followed Moses' instructions. They asked the Egyptians for silver, gold, and clothing. And the Lord moved the hearts of the Egyptians. They gave it all. God's people left the land of bondage not empty-handed, but carrying the treasures of the nation. And so, on that night marked by death and deliverance, Egypt fell to its knees, and Israel rose to begin its journey toward the promise. And so after 430 years in Egypt, the children of Israel were finally set free. The chains of slavery were broken because God heard their cries. Egypt would never be the same. The final night in Egypt passed. Israel, once enslaved, now marched as a free nation. Men, women, children, from the youngest to the oldest, the strongest to the weakest. They carried their belongings, their flocks, and the silver and gold given to them by the Egyptians. Egypt wanted them gone. Egypt wanted to forget. Egypt feared the God of Israel. And so, after 10 plagues, Pharaoh's heart finally gave in. Broken by grief, surrounded by ruin, he allowed the people of Israel to leave. A vast multitude, men, women, children, and livestock, left Egypt under Moses' leadership, carrying not just riches but the promise of a new beginning.